Welcome to Prime Suspects, alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr. I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, I didn't think we'd ever start an episode by quoting Eminem, but as he says in Till I Collapse, when your run is over, just admit when it's at its end. And to that end, walk us through a Black Friday that took on a new meaning with the Eagles' loss to the Bears, killing your last Circa Survivor entry, as well as your overall experience in this year's contest.
I got out of Thursday, and when I did my pre-show Thursday, I tipped every dog, tipped them in the money line and whatnot, and thinking this ain't gonna happen. And then when the Ravens got beat, it was like, okay, I'm glad I went out on the Raiders last week and not the Ravens this week. I'll accept that. Now I'm going into Friday, and I do my pre-game show there, and the charge is going up. Bears money line. I'm thinking, okay. So I actually had really no feelings about the thing from 7-0, driving from Kingston to Montego Bay, had the ESPN scoreboard up on the dashboard, and really felt very few emotions through the whole thing. Felt like there was never any chance of coming back. I think there was an opportunity pre-halftime. But looking at it, I don't think there was any way I get through those 2 days, even if I had 5 entries. And I did note that I didn't have the Cowboys available, which was the one I tipped hard Thursday morning, was the Cowboys plus 3.5 and money line. But it was interesting because when I did Saturday night show with Scott and Gabe from Survivor Atlas, it's kind of laid out that the people that are left right now are either, I think there's 8 people that had no favorites left. So obviously just played the game by picking what they thought and got left in a lucky spot. And then the other 40 odd people, which seem like they're all syndicates, poker players, game theory guys, and all these kind of things. So already re-strategizing for 2026, already have 3 other people lined up to at least try and get 40 entries as a group. I'm looking for another 10 to get 50, because fuck this, I'm going hard next year to go after this thing. I was starting to get some false hope that this thing might actually get further than what it was, although Christmas Day I thought was still going to be a shocker or a one to get through. But it was an 81 shot. Those 4 money lines winning was around 80-1. So good luck to those that are left. And I have no ill feeling or no sadness or anything of that nature or emptiness that I thought I would have when I got kicked out of this thing. Because, yeah, it was just the way it ended was fine by me.
And as you get an early jump on strategizing for 2026, of course, the 2025 season carries on. So with favorites dropping like flies across the NFL and less mayhem, but perhaps more marquee matchups across the college football card, how were last week's results as a whole for Prime Sports and BetCris?
It was sort of a nothing week. I think we lost overall generally across the board. NCAA was no good pregame. Live was okay. NFL was actually good for pregame, not live. Live is where we got beat this week overall in general. I don't know why or how or where that sort of happened. Pre-game, again, was good. On a side note, NBA was actually pretty good, which had been pretty rough the last few weeks. So it's up and down all over the place. Obviously, we've got a whole lot going on right now to keep Prime where it is and push things forward. But it's just take the bets, move the line, and get through the weekend. But live betting was where we took most of the lumps this week.
And Joe, to borrow Adam's phrase, up and down, all over the place. Eagles fandom aside, what were your thoughts on the Thanksgiving and Black Friday games this year?
And pretty amazing that all 4 underdogs won outright between the Thursday games and Friday's black, deep, dark misery for us Eagles fans. So it would have been a great strategy if I wasn't spending so much time actually cooking Thanksgiving dinner this year, because Mrs. Brennan had to work in the NICU both the night before and the day of on Thanksgiving. But yeah, there were some really great college basketball games. I mean, I think sometimes, especially out there, like bettors who are like thinking about like, oh, I got to bet NFL. NFL is absolutely the sharpest, most efficient market on the planet. And so college basketball is just ripe for it. And it gets, precious little discussion, I think, right now, which is probably, none of the smart guys want to talk about it because they probably don't want the market becoming even more efficient with more participants, but that really is the way to go. I remember just a year ago, the biggest problem that Prime had was college basketball first half totals. So that had such an effect on our business. Anyway, Beyond that, I found it very hard to even watch the rest of the NFL this past weekend. And, I think the biggest move of the week was Lane Kiffin trying to somehow, I love the analogies. It's like he's going to leave his wife and kids for another woman, but would like to at least spend Christmas with his wife and kids if he would be allowed to do that. So I don't know, all in all, kind of a grim weekend. And I really do think that Adam is being very magnanimous and has to learn from Mrs. Brennan how to really grind down on my raging guilt at my Eagles putting him out of the contest here this year. And he's got to learn how to milk that for all it's worth. I feel personally responsible about that one.
Well, not to get lost in the shuffle of all of this, but Joe would also like to take a moment to get a quick take from you on comments last week from Ohio Governor Mike DeWine saying he wished he'd never approved sports betting, considering Ohio was Prime's debut state.
Yeah, I think Governor DeWine is positioning himself now rhetorically for his post-governorship. He's now, since he's term limited as governor, he's not really a good presidential prospect. There's going to have to be a way that he's going to have to earn his keep here, and positioning himself as a values guy, everything like that in the Republican universe is probably a good thing for him to do. It's all a pile of horse shit because it was only a matter of months ago that Governor DeWine was looking to raise taxes on sports betting, not in a punitive way, but because Governor DeWine wanted to build sports stadiums all over Ohio, both the Chicago and the youth sports level. That was going to be his legacy. And he was going to do that on the back of sports betting revenue. So I find his comments to be disingenuous. Imagine that, a disingenuous politician. And other than just noting his hypocrisy on the way out the door, I don't think there's any more gravitas that should be afforded it.
And of course, one reason some may be having second thoughts about offering sports betting could be the emergence of prediction markets. And to that end, this week's news, Robinhood and Susquehanna International Group, also known as SIG, have partnered to launch their own prediction market. Adam, a lot of people are familiar with SIG, but not necessarily with the business model of being a market maker. InGame's report on this noted that it receives rebates in return for providing liquidity on Kalshi. Would love it if you could break down what this means and how you compare it to legacy exchanges such as Betfair and Matchbook.
Yeah, well, it's all the same. To be an exchange, to be the totalizer, any of that, you need liquidity. It goes back to horse racing recently, how the computer groups, there's been sort of some back and forth of the value of those guys that really are taking, smart money out of the pools that the recreational money goes in. Betfair, 20 plus years ago, where it was 33% bookmakers involved, 33% professionals, and 30% fish recreational players. That's now 49.8% bookmakers, 49.8% professionals, and just a smidgen of recreational money, which is why Betfair's looking at a sportsbook, not an exchange. And this is just the same thing that these prediction markets are running into. Now that there's more of them popping up, need more market makers, they not need more liquidity to buy and sell. SIG, which obviously been involved in all the markets, traded all over the world. There's no issue with liquidity there when you're trading Apple stocks or, Valleys or any of these other things, oil and those aspects of it. Well, now you've got a new product with sports and you need liquidity in these markets. So there's people on the other side that are buying the market maker. What a Kalshi and Robinhood and all those kind of doing is incentivizing people to put up numbers on all these things. Betfair's big one for a long time was exchanges make money through commission. So they would offer people zero-based commission. So, if you won money, you traded money, it's costing you nothing. It's just you're going through a facilitator. This is very much the same. There's a charge on every wager and there's rebates paid to the people that actually accept the match on these things. The story was accurate to the information we've been hearing. The majority of the Kalshi business has gone through Robinhood. I'd heard a lot of the recreational business was actually going through Robinhood. So everyone's trying to tap in to what looks like some weaker markets within that ecosystem. SIG just, again, as a market maker, the idea is to have as many liquidity outlets as possible because just like a sportsbook, you need multiple states, multiple countries, multiple everything. The more players you have, the more liquidity. The easier it is to try and guarantee profits per se. So they've been sort of looking around this space. We know they were an investor in Kalshi. They've sort of been, I think, dabbling with poly markets at one point. They're in Matchbook, or one of the market makers there as well. So this is kind of just their pathway into the market of, again, getting more liquidity, wanting to take positions based on their internal models and traders and all those kind of things of the business. So what does this do to sort of, Kalshi and those others? Well, it obviously eats a lot into what Kalshi was doing, but ultimately all these things are going to feed off each other. Whether it's a Kalshi, whether it's a Robinhood, whether it's a crypto.com, whether it's a sport trade, whether it's any of these exchanges, they all need the same market makers, and there isn't that many in the world. There's not that many that are willing to put their numbers up there to be played into. I've said this for a long time. There's a lot of good bookmakers that are horrible bettors, and there's a lot of great bettors that are horrible bookmakers. When you have to price up every game, it becomes a lot harder than just picking and choosing what spots you want. When you're on the bookmaking side and you are pricing up all those numbers, and generally it's, you're pricing them up with other people's money, a lot of them can't convert that information and really understand how to use that as a bettor. So all in all, this whole thing is just going to end up in one big muddled mud pie. And you can sort of see the ones that are heading into this, Price Picks mentioned something, which when, again, fantasy stuff, they're all the unregulated players is trying to stay in the unregulated world within the ecosystem of the US. Underdog giving back their license somewhere or pulling out of an application or something. Like, again, this is just a whole heap of companies that are trying to find their spot and generally trying to do it in the way best possible. There's just no real oversight in what they're actually doing, because when there's no oversight, it's cheaper to operate and you can sort of, squiggle out of things when you get into trouble and stuff like that. So that's where it's at. The winners and the losers, I guess the losers, Kalshi, with what some of the things that come up with them. The winners are Robinhood and SIG. But this is a long way from over. And I guess the argument is, will there still be sports on these exchanges in 6 or 12 months? Or will you be only able to play the political events and the Oscars and stuff like that?
Joe, we've got plenty to unpack there, and we will get to Underdog, as Adam alluded to, in just a bit. But first, the Robinhood SIG partnership story dropped at the same time as other major prediction market news last week, yet many said this was the more impactful story by far. So what do you make of Robinhood and SIG teaming up? And building on Adam's take, what do you think of the implications for Kalshi, who also partners with Robinhood?
Yeah, I imagine the Kalshi crew did a lot of heavy drinking over the holiday. They had a tough week. Robinhood, you can make an argument, might be the most influential company right now when it comes to prediction markets because they have all the traffic, right? If anything, there's nothing really new there. They're a super affiliate right now, hosing traffic into Kalshi, and pretty soon they're going to start hosing traffic into this new exchange that they have with SIG. If anything, I mentioned this last week, and I wonder if this will hasten this, really starting to hype the other markets that you can do on prediction markets, where like sports overwhelmingly accounts for Kalshi's dollar volume, and Robinhood overwhelmingly accounted for that volume at Kalshi. So how are they going to make up the difference? And so I'm waiting to see how they turn up the noise, because Kalshi now, they're going to have to become really good marketers very quickly in order to make up the difference. I mean, they've raised a lot of money at an incredibly high valuation, only to have about, if it's a 4-legged stool, they had 3 legs chopped out from underneath them with the announcement of this SIG Robinhood deal. So how are they going to be able to keep their existing investors happy? How are they going to be able to keep the forward momentum, not only for themselves, but right now they still are the bellwether for prediction markets, because Polymarket is slowly trying to enter the US market. Crypto.com really isn't up and quite at that level, doesn't even really have the mind share right now. So not only do they have to market, but now they're going to have to market more broadly. And that's going to be, how they get people doing like these little spot markets on entertainment and things like that. And I think that is a potential danger for prediction markets, because one could say, we've already seen the backlash that you had, on a smaller basis with daily fantasy sports, but obviously much larger with sports betting, the media backlash that you had, like, what is this doing to the game? Where do you draw the line? Well, now that you're going to have venues in which you can bet on I mean, we're quibbling about micro betting, right? Pitching on, betting on every pitch ball or every possession or every shot, things like that. When you now have these companies that have taken a ton of money, goosed up these massive valuations entirely based on sports. And Adam's also right with the comment he made there. It's not entirely certain that they're going to be in the sports business within a year or two. So this now really having to get out and be aggressive, not only in marketing, but in marketing these, you can bet on literally anything, betting on birds on a wire and things like that. I wonder if they are hastening their eventual backlash as a result here.
All right. Well, from the latest in prediction markets to a good old-fashioned sports betting launch, Missouri is now live. Adam, Missouri becomes the first state to launch since March of last year. How do you size up the market in terms of opportunity? And with Circa holding one of its two untethered licenses, how do you think the low-margin model will fare in the Show Me state?
So if someone put a map in front of me and asked me where Missouri was, I think I'd be able to find it with sort of working out some other states and whatnot. So it was kind of funny because recently I was shared a TikTok video, something about, New York and Missouri, people fighting over, people in Missouri saying they'd never want to live in New York and all this stuff because of the mayor that got voted in recently. And the New Yorkers, same thing, like, holy hell, Missouri, like, where are you guys? I don't even know where you are on the map. So, I mean, for me, I believe St. Louis is in there somewhere. So it's around. And I think there's some confusion at times about Kansas versus Kansas City and some of that border issues there as well. That's about all I know of Missouri. What kind of sports betting will they bring? No idea. I imagine for Circa, it's somewhat like Kentucky, although I'm a lot more familiar with Kentucky than I am Missouri. And, I haven't looked at numbers recently of how they're pulling in. Obviously, we're in there now. We're sort of looking at the volume. It's growing, things of that nature. I still think it's the same struggle in a lot of Americans don't understand the value of, shopping prices and looking at that. They know DraftKings, they know FanDuel, they know all those other pieces. I think it goes the same for the prediction markets. Like everyone's kind of in a race to get the eyeballs, which is why Robinhood is in such a good position because now they're just offering a product, after hours kind of thing when everybody's finished trading the crypto or the stock market. They're just moving into another aspect of it. I can't imagine Missouri has a big GDP and big expectations on that side of it as well. Again, might be completely out of whack here on who they are and where they are. I have no expectations. I think it was good that the way that the regulators or the legislators, whoever made this decision, did choose the two untethered licenses. I believe there was a good variation, good reasonings and things of that nature, which is the only reason I really know, about Circa and Missouri of that. So I don't know. Joe's probably got a lot more historical education on who lives in Missouri and what they do down there. So I'll let him take over this one.
Yeah, Joe, we might have to table the geography and history lessons on Missouri for another episode. But to bring us back to the story of play, a few days prior to Missouri's launch, Underdog announced it was withdrawing its approved application to operate in the state, saying it plans instead to launch its own prediction market product, which can't operate as a licensed sports betting operator. This tells us a lot about where Underdog sees the most upside for its business. What do you make of the decision and how much it should possibly concern regulators across other states that have approved sports betting?
Well, first of all, regarding that very serious question that Adam brought up, living in New York City versus living in Missouri, I would take living in Kansas City, Missouri any day, just based on the barbecue. And it's a better sports town. So with Underdog, I'm not entirely surprised. I mean, Underdog probably looks at the distance that it has to make up as a sports book migrating from DFS plus. And, it's been no secret, Underdog has tried to develop their own platform internally. A lot of the growing pains that, say, for instance, Prime has experienced, Underdog has experienced as well. It's really tough to be, it seems odd since they're the number 2 DFS plus company to say, to be a small sports book and try and grow, but they were in Ohio and North Carolina is another state where they tried to establish themselves. It's just very hard. So kicking off in this direction, there's a little more open field for them to run around in. I do think, they're making quite a bet there. But Jeremy Levine, who's the founder of Underdog, I mean, he's made a couple of smart moves here ever since he started Star Street Sports and then flipped that to DraftKings. And then his next company, he flipped that to Paddy Power, which is now Flutter. So he seems to be a pretty sharp guy. He seems to zig when everybody else zags in this industry. So good for him. To me, again, there's so much uncertainty around prediction markets. It seems a little early to say, let's just throw in the towel on sportsbook and throw everything on prediction markets because, again, I think they may run into the same thing that everybody else runs into, which is, okay, well, you're going to have a couple of companies at the top, say Kalshi and a Polymarket, that are kind of like the FanDuel and DraftKings of prediction markets, not to mention that the FanDuel and DraftKings are coming with their own prediction markets. And then you're going to try and make headway for your brand there. I think it's going to be really tough, but then again, what else are they going to do, right? But I do think it's a little early for people to be turning over their licenses and making such an all-in move about what they think the world is going to look like a year or two from now.
All right. And with that, Adam, let's take this home as we always do. College football conference championship and NFL week 14 openers are up. Where's the biggest action been so far?
So I've got two in each. Virginia, the money's been running hard on them. They're 2.5 to 3. It's all one side there. Georgia, Bama's getting great two-way action. Georgia money's at the 1, 1.5, 2.5. Bama's at the 2.5 and 3. I may have that around the wrong way, but I hopefully don't. And then on the NFL, there was two that jumped out. Green Bay, Chicago has been heavily bet. Green Bay money at 4, 5.5, and Chicago at 7, 6.5. Looks like that line's kind of bounced between 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Some people have bought alternates and whatnot. And then finally, Baltimore, Pittsburgh under has been bet very hard early on. It's opened 46, and that's down to 43.5 now. I guess, expecting a tight game there, and Pittsburgh pretty awful yesterday afternoon. Baltimore much better Thursday. But that's where the early action is right now. And, there was some Cowboys action Thursday night. But, yeah, that's it for now.
All right. And that's it for this episode as well. To the audience, thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.